We got to, because it seems like everybody hates everybody right now. And that is not going to work out for very long if things keep going the way they go and the economy gets worse and, the virus gets worse and things get locked down and just things in general get tougher and longer, right? Because we're living, I think, right now, this moment of time that we're still in. It feels, like it's been a long time and things are really tough, but the truth is that we're still in the afterglow of everything that we already had,
Yeah.
They've just imagine it's like a candle and we've burned out all the wax, but it's still going because the wick is wet, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now, because we still have, you can still go on, Amazon and order something. You can still go to a grocery store and get food right now.
Yeah.
So lots of places are doing rent deferrals. We are still living in the glow of how things were, in February.
One of the things that Peter Schiff was saying is that like things are never going to get back to the way things were, at least when our 2019 timeframe, because he was going on to explain how like we were in a significant bubble already. So like we were going to have like an economic collapse. And like that's important to note, because like if we were living as if we were creating a bubble, then like it's really hard to go back to those levels of the ideal vision of capitalism,
Right. Yeah. No, I know. And that's what I'm getting at here is, because we're still living in that afterglow of all of that. Once the afterglow runs out, things are really going to actually be hard now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
My life, again, I'm lucky. I have had great support networks, and, I've been staying with people, stayed with you, staying with my mom now. I'm lucky. Food, not a problem. Having a place to stay is not a problem. Like I have very few problems in the world right now, and I think there's a lot of people who, like me, who basically are doing okay. A lot of people are still working, still have their income, whatever. There's a lot of people who are in decent situations, but I think that there's a potential that it's going to, we're going to exit this and every American is going to feel, the brunt of it to some extent pretty soon. Because a lot of Americans right now are not feeling the brunt of it. I would say I'm not feeling the brunt of it. So I stay home a lot. Whatever, that's not a big deal. But I think there's the number of people who are feeling the brunt of it is going up, back to that 15% unemployment rate. And it's going to go up and up and up unless things get better. And I don't foresee things getting better anyway, because, how do you reboot a service industry? How do you do that? If no one has any money, no one's paying for services. You know what I mean? So how do you reboot that industry without having actual things that you produce?
That's why I think that we have to get back to producing in America again. Like we don't produce in America right now. So like the shirts that we make, the pants, the shoes, the cars, all of that needs to be produced back. The food, like you were just explaining earlier, how the food's not produced in America. And so that what that really comes down to is that like we're not using our assets that we have here in America wisely, and we're relying on other economies to support us. Thus why other economies are production economies, whereas we are a service-based economy, basically, that is using credit to be able to bring those items in. Well, now the credit crunch is starting to happen. And the only way to really to solve that issue is to either slowly pay that back, and it's going to suck because we're still going to rely on these people to make the products that we know how to make, or we're going to make it here, and we're going to use those products and we're going to ship them over there, and they're going to be just as happy because that's how trade works. It's a twofold thing. And so if we're producing items that they like and they want to buy it, which they will, because if we could produce it for better and cheaper than them by competing in a global economy, then we can make things better. The only problem with that is the whole COVID-19 situation is kind of going to slow down this process, which is why I believe that we need to lock down for like 2 months and then get a huge initiative going to build these factories, to build, to be able to launch all of this. And that way we could shoot it out and market it out to the world, because the world also is going to need our
Especially
help.
since we need this, we need to get people hired, dude.
Right.
We need to get
we
people
could,
jobs.
we could overproduce, and as long as we're we could even, America might even consider even issuing an entire new dollar that runs exclusively on this economy that we would create locally. That would be one way to guarantee that people, we don't go completely under. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that way we could buy food and we could buy all these other things. And sure, the loans that we have that are connected to, our housing and stuff like that, that's going to be another issue. But I also believe that we have to have a huge housing initiative. Do you know in China that they're launching another huge housing initiative over there? Foreign investors are starting to pour money into China's housing market, just because I guess they're seeing the asset price is going higher and higher, and they're saying it's a bubble. But I don't necessarily see it being a bubble, since they produce all of the world's items. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's actually the real epicenter of where real wealth is, according to Marx's idea of how an economy works, which is connected to the means of production. If we're not, if we don't have any connection to the means of production, and we're just relying on credit to import our items, then we're completely out of the loop. It just seems obvious to me. That's what it seems obvious. That is what is happening, because that is what is happening. And these companies are freaking out because they're how do we maintain our profits? Because the real problem here in America is if we make these products here, people want a living wage, and it's no shit. Everybody wants a living wage. So how do we deal with that? We have to think of a new creative way to do it, and that's where I've suggested a Job Corps.
Right. Yeah.
And we've already talked about that before, but basically it would be modeled off of the military. It would be giving them lesser wages, with the promise that you're going to get real life experience working in some type of leadership role as you help produce American products for cheaper, so you can make everybody's lives better off. And maybe we would negotiate some type of deal with the local universities, so that way we could get you free tuition, and some type of GI Bill type deal, and maybe our job or labor group could even make the actual dorm rooms that these people who graduate from this business, are going.
Well, dude, they could also do it like the CBs and train a certain group of this Job Corps to be, construction people. That's what the CBs are, dude. The CBs are just the most elite builders in the world.
Right.
Right.
I mean, you could even activate the CBs, to be.
But what I'm saying is, if you could do this Job Corps just permanently, you just go into the Job Corps. Oh, I'm going to be a construction man, and they train you how to be a construction man, and then you get to go build stuff. Things that people will use. You'd probably build their own barracks situation where people could live in housing provided to them by the labor brigade.
Mm-hmm.
You built this giant complex for people to live in who are working for the same thing you are. You're all just working together. It's funny. It reminds me of something, a lot of people say they can't stand communism or socialism who are in the military, which is funny to me because at its core, it's sort of a very socialist thing, right? If you think of the military as your government, which, they're part of the government, then they're providing your housing, your paycheck, your education, your insurance, your health care, your clothing. They provide you with everything, and you just do the work that they tell you to do, which is interesting thought. Obviously the military does not produce anything, and that's sort of the problem there. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, sorry, my other camera kind of went out. It was kind of weird. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, but I saw a little do a spinning wheel thing.
All right.
But what do you think
So,
about that? Like it is sort of a socialist sort of setup. But if we
well,
could actually do that with the labor
I
brigade and then produce
I think
things.
that the socialism, no matter what, if we are going to be talking about socialism, it has to maintain the principles that America is founded on, which is the principles of individual liberty. If you're forcing anybody to do participate in a government program that breaks that rule, then it's not part of the American tradition. And since it's not part of the American tradition, I would assume that it's most likely part of the Soviet style socialism, which is all about the government ownership of the means of production. Like
Right.
that's the thing where people kind of get confused, because like when we're talking about socialism by definition is it was supposed to be when the proletariat takes over the means of production to make it more democratic. The way that the Soviets interpret the proletariat was when the government takes over the means of production. So they created a definition of socialism is the government. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case, because we, the people, are the government. Like,
Right.
you see what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
as long as we uphold the principles of individual liberty and we find a way to reconcile socialism with capitalism, which I believe that we have somewhat found a way to do that, then I believe that it's worth considering.
Oh, certainly.
For new ideas going forward. So that's where
I mean, it could be so beneficial for us. It could be a win-win, Just
Right.
imagine that. You get to have a sense of purpose. You get to get educated. You get to have a secure, safe income that you can rely on. You get to know you'll have somewhere to live. Like so many stresses for you are just taken out of your life. And you just get to do work and accumulate some money, and then you can go do something else if you want. You know what I mean? Like, it's giving people so much more power and structure and control over their own life by enabling them, to work and have a
Right.
stability in the beginning of their life. That's why you see so many people go into the military and have such incredible social mobility, economic social mobility, because the military sets you up to move up. It takes a bunch of stresses out of your life. It gives you a ton of stability, and they tell you how to manage your money. I mean, a lot of people don't listen to it very much, but they tell you how. It sets you up to go places if you use that time wisely. And you could do the same thing with the labor brigade, and you don't have to be forced to go into it, but just imagine if it was an option. If that was just an option, how many people in America would be like, so you're telling me you're not going to pay me a living wage, but you are going to provide my housing, you are going to provide my food, you are going to provide my education, my health care. Like, you're literally going to provide everything in life that I need to live safely. And then on top of that, you're going to pay me.
Yeah, and
I'm going to move out of my parents' basement. You betcha.
And they got to know what the mission is too. Like in the military, we know the mission. We all have a mission, right? The Navy is to go out on your ship, the Marines, whatever. This labor brigade their mission is to produce items cheaper for America, to make all of their lives better off. It has to still have this call to patriotism, to be able to be a person
for the improvement of the American life.
Exactly. So when somebody says, I work for the labor brigade, that's something that you could actually be proud of, because they're the reason why your laptop is cheaper, why your jeans are cheaper, why your shoes are cheaper,
why your housing is cheaper.
Yes, exactly. And like, this is all things that we could do. Like, we could actually make a reality here in America. I don't know what level of government this would have to be initiated on.
I feel like it'd be easy if it was federal.
Yeah,
Think about it, man. If it was federal, just like the military, and they could just station you anywhere in America that we needed infrastructure, or we needed to put a plant, or we needed to produce items, that would mean that we could put factories in so many small, places with struggling economies, and just have labor brigade people, you're going to go get, deployed or stationed at this factory for 2 years in Kansas. And you know what I mean? Like, it could repopulate so much of the open America. And I don't mean that in, necessarily in construction, but I mean that there's a lot of places where people have sort of drained out, just because the economy in those local areas was very hard to sustain. And if you have people who have a steady income there all the time, they're going to help that economy grow as well, because they'll be putting money into the local economy while they're living there, you know?
Right.
So it's like,
so I think the way to properly think about stimulating a local economy is, where do you want to put the means of production? Because that's something that has to be put into the conversation as well. When we bring back these factories from China, where are we going to put them? Because those locations of those factories are going to, you know, create local economies that are going to be sustainable for that entire community. So I don't know if the question would be, do you want to bring them back here to Los Angeles to stimulate these economies, or
honestly,
do you want to bring
put them in the
them
Midwest.
well, these are all quite serious questions that are worth considering, you know.
I think
they have to
know,
go somewhere.
they do have to go somewhere. And I think that the Midwest has an economy that, you know, just in general is in a more economical depression than a lot of the rest of the country, because they used to have a bunch of production. Now they don't really have anything. You know, put them in the Midwest, and then logistically you can ship out like this. You know what I mean? You don't have to go all the way across anymore.
Right.
You know,
And
I mean, honestly, you could just target communities that you see needing help, right? Like if you see a city like Detroit, you know, or Flint, Michigan, you see a place that needs help, that things have gone sour. Imagine if in Flint, Michigan, they had deployed this labor brigade, you know, like a bunch of construction men and plumbers, and like they fixed the water situation.
yeah.
You could be like, yeah, I was deployed with the, you know, 101st Builders Union, and
The
we
building
fucking
brigade, and we took this over, and we actually
fixed
made it
Flint,
10
Michigan's
times
water.
better. We
Yeah.
not only did we fix their water, we made them buildings on top of that with more sustainable housing. And you know,
could you imagine that? Like the pride you could feel in that? Like, yeah, I was there. I did that. I helped build that place up. I helped fix that water. I helped, you know, I made these roads. Or like, you get to have this pride in being like, yeah, I was part of this project at this place and time with this group of people, and we accomplished something, you know? And if you're seeing cities that need help with stuff, you know, failing economies, you can inject help into that place, you know, build up some infrastructure, put in the factories. You know, maybe the paychecks from these people don't have to come necessarily entirely from the government. Maybe the companies who hire these workers on, if you work for Nike, say we bring the Nike factories back and the labor brigade supplies labor for Nike factories. What if Nike just paid the government for however many bodies they want, you know, in terms of laborers? They just paid it straight to the government, and all of these corporations just paid all of it straight to the government, and the government just distributed it down, you know, into that, plus maybe some of the tax dollars.
Have them being some type of form of contractor. That
Yeah,
if you want to take this contract where these guys get paid, maybe Nike could even set up the housing facilities and stuff. Like that would be their way to take care of their people. You know, if Nike wants to set up. Well, I mean, why not? Like, you can't put all the blame on the government, or all the responsibility.
I'm not trying to put all the responsibility on the government. But what I'm saying is that, like, you have to also be realistic in that Nike, in bringing to bring it back, it has to be a good deal for Nike too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and
no,
then
absolutely.
paying to build all this housing and, you know, pay for the housing is a whole different deal. But if they're paying the government for each body, you can just build that into the price.
If you wipe out their taxes, like they don't have to pay taxes by coming back, and the only taxes that they have to pay on these products that they produce through here at a significantly cheaper price are the taxes associated with you know, sales tax. I think that would probably, you know, be a good incentive for them. I think that they would come running back.
Yeah, maybe. Either way, the point I'm getting at is that, you know, this labor brigade could be expanded in so many directions, you know, beyond, you know, being a builder who just works for the labor brigade and we build stuff. You know, you could also have this division, you know, that does, you know, contracting out to companies for whatever labor they want, you know, or like, there's just so many different options of things that you could do with this. And if you did have that mission of, like, you know, making things cheaper, better for every American.
That's the goal. That's absolutely
that. I think the every American is, you know, important there. Everybody.
Yeah, that's the goal. because whenever all the items are cheaper, because one of the things like Peter Schiff was talking about on the Joe Rogan show was how we need to make Americans more productive. And like, I understand where he's coming from, because like in order to make people's lives better off, you could either make them more productive to make them be able to make more money, or you could lower the costs. So like you
Right.
could either make more money or lower the costs. And I think that to basically find a way to pay Americans more money is going to be very difficult. I don't think that there's a lot of ways to really improve that, because it's such a competitive world, especially considering how we're a service-based economy. So like a lot of the services that we offer are, only the top of the top people are making movies in Hollywood, or becoming the investment bankers or the top corporate lawyers, and everybody else is kind of getting smushed in the middle. So that's why like we need to bring production back.
Right.
And so like you can't pay people more by artificially raising the minimum wage to say like, hey, we need $15 minimum wage, because what happens? Well, we already saw what happens when that happened, which was like previously it used to cost $8 for you to go get lunch, right? But now, which was an hour's worth of wages. Now it costs you around $15 to go get lunch, which still is equivalent to an hour's worth of wages. So we know from our empirical evidence that raising the minimum wage doesn't really do anything. We've also talked about like the idea of profit sharing, where we could like find a way to equitably distribute the profits to the lowest members of like a company like McDonald's, to be able to pay them more. But I still don't think that might solve the issue. It would raise, I think it's still worth considering, but I don't think that it would solve the issue for everybody, which is that we need to be able to get society to a point where we don't need to worry about money anymore.
Well, but one way that you can, effectively pay people more is by what we were talking about with this whole labor brigade thing, in that if you take care of all of the things that are important for someone to need done, their housing, their food, their
refrigerator,
a bed, like think, when you take care of all that stuff for them, you can pay them a lot less and they'll still be pretty darn happy.
Yes.
Think how much you get paid as an E1. Nothing. Like, I think my first paycheck in the military was like $2.
Yeah, I think I remember mine. It was like $32, and I was like, oh my! I almost cried. I was like, what the heck?
And and then for like a year after that, I was getting paid like $200, I think, a month or something. It was low. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was still overwhelmingly happy, because all of that money that I was getting paid, even if it was very little, was like just all for me. You know what I mean? I didn't have to spend it on my rent or my phone, or like I didn't have to spend it on anything except stuff I want to do. And boy, did I for my first year. Jeez, I was such an idiot with my money. I could be sitting on so much money if I had been smarter when I was younger. Oh my God, I blew through my like E1 and E2. I just blew through all that money. I was balling out. I was like, yeah, this is so cool, but whatever, at least I had fun. But that's the point, is like, I wasn't getting paid very much. You weren't getting paid very much, but you still have like this really pretty solid quality of life,
and
that's
to mention,
that's the important thing,
Yeah, you're gonna meet other people and get
community.
Yeah, no, but you're going to be exposed to a diverse background. Like that's exactly what I was. I never met people from the South, from Alabama, from Texas, from all of these different places, and like,
dude,
that's what the military does. Like, if you want diversity, like, there's nothing more diverse than the
They've
military.
been on the forefront of diversity forever.
I'll tell you that. Like,
before I went in the Navy, I had never even heard of the Philippines. You know how many Filipinos are in the Navy? It's like
all of them.
A lot. Yeah, dude. It's a ton. Well, the Navy used to recruit directly out of the Philippines. Anyway, there's tons. Yeah. I'd never even heard of a Filipino before boot camp. And then in boot camp, I had, a ton of Filipinos in with me. And I was like, where is this? Yeah. Like I was meeting people that I had no idea about. My high school had 2 black kids,
Wow.
2 kids from China, and like 1 Indian kid, and everyone else was white from Colorado, and just like a Bible Belt, typical America, like
Yeah.
my boot camp division was, I think, it was more black people than in one room than I had ever seen before. Honestly, my division was 80 guys, and in that room there was more people of color than I think I had ever seen at all. Like, outside of traveling outside of the country. And I became friends with so many of those people. And I became friends with people from like so many different backgrounds. You know what I mean? Like people from the deep South, and also, my other friends from like Russia and, China and Canada and, California, Tennessee, like
and you're
Alabama.
friends with pretty much with all of them, because like you're all united behind this one idea, which was you wanted to do something for America. In this case, that uniting idea would be to make American products cheaper. Which I think that's
to build up America.
And you might get a GI Bill out of it, so that'd be cool.
I only see it as a good thing. I mean, honestly, if this was a thing, I would think about just going into it even at this stage in my life. And the thing about this that's cool is that with the labor brigade, with the military, there's a lot of age requirements on when you can get in. With the labor brigade, there's so much different types of work. Who's to say that you couldn't get into that and just have steady work, a lot of the time?
We have to build more housing. That's something we know we need to do. Like if we could get the labor brigade to be so productive to where, like, yes, it would be unfortunate to knock down people's housing, but if we can make a deal for them, it would be like, hey, we're going to knock down this area. We're going to build you your own new house, and you're going to be able to put your family on top of you or something like that to make it better for everybody. So we're taking advantage of this room. Like, like we're here in Los Angeles, we're dealing with a lot of problems. Like, like there's this housing problems. There's, everybody wants to have this huge mansion, but everybody can't squeeze into these tiny little areas. And like, we have to, find a way to address that, and again, it has to be by volunteer.
The other thing is that, it doesn't necessarily, given, this world that we're temporarily living in with this, where this labor brigade exists, right? This thought project, that doesn't even have to be much of a problem, because most of the United States is pretty sparsely populated. The reason that places like, Los Angeles and New York City are so overcrowded is because we live in such a service-based economy, and those are 2 of the places with the most services provided, right? So you're forced to try and fit yourself into this community where the jobs are, even though there's no housing. But if you have this thing where we're able to produce all this stuff and we have people building things all over the place, the work doesn't have to be in 2 major cities, which is essentially how the model works right now, is everyone's going into a city to work. And that's where the, majority of the jobs are, because that's where service type things are found, is in the collection of people, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like we could move the jobs all over the place and spread them out. And then people could have, roomier housing in more places. And you don't necessarily everybody doesn't need their own home on a street with a backyard and everything. It's nice to have, I admit, but, it's not necessary. You can live in like a big complex with a communal garden and things like that, and it's still very nice. I lived in one when I was in Berlin, like the giant building.
We're not trying to take over the entire private sector either. Like this is just enough to be able to make enough housing for the people in the labor corps, and enough housing that they could continue to produce, to be able to make people, when they get out of the labor corps, they know they have a place to live,
right.
Or they're making senior living facilities. They're making all of the hospitals. Things that we know, hospitals, things that we know that we need in society.
Fixing all of our bridges. Oh man.
Like there's so many things, like, and that's all stuff that we know that like I know that for a fact that both sides, the Democrats and the conservatives, know that we need to invest in infrastructure. Like
I mean,
that's something that everybody agrees in. It's just the way that we go about financing it is the tough part, because the Democrats' only solution is to finance it with taxation, and like taxation is great, like, but it's something that is
and we're already so
unsustainable.
overtaxed anyway.
Yeah, and so that there's more creative ways. Taxation is the least effective way to like make our economy better. Like you can't just tax from the rich and give to the poor, because like that doesn't really solve much. It might solve a temporary problem, which is temporarily distributing income, but like it's not going to make anybody's lives better off. That's the real goal, is to make everybody's lives better off.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, we've probably covered this pretty well. And I think it's apparent that however it would be implemented, it would certainly, I think, necessarily, to survive, need to be, a partnership between the government and between some corporations in order to foot the bill. Building factories for companies, they pay for the factory, and then you supply the labor, or then filling the factory with laborers, and you supply the laborers and they pay for them, or like there could be some kind of a deal worked out. But I think in order for it to work, it would need to be working between the government and the corporations, right? Like it would have to be a partnership.
I think it's important to prove that it can be done first, and to not just jump into things. Because like when you look at the Soviet Union, one of the things that where they went wrong was when Stalin basically collectivized everything at the same time. And that basically meant that he took over the means of production, and it was all a socialist under communist control now. And that's like, I think it's important to gradually go into things and to test and prove it. And I think a great idea, to be able to prove it, using the Nike example, if they were to take one shoe, for instance, just one shoe, and prove that they could produce it at the cheapest rate possible and get it out to the world, and maybe even test the numbers of how much profit that they could make off of that. Because I truly believe if they scale things up to where they can produce this shoe for let's say $40 instead of the $200 Jordan shoe for $40, to get it out to the world. And where if it's a $40, then you treat that shoe kind of like a van shoe, for instance. So now you're like, okay, well, I replace my van shoe every couple months whenever they get beat up, and then you get another fresh pair of Jordans. And so like that, there's still going to be consistent demand as if the shoes are cheaper. And so I think if they could be able to produce it with one product and prove to the world that, hey, this is possible, if only we just eliminate this class hierarchy within our own companies. Because companies like Nike, it's very obvious that they're on the forefront of social justice. Like they're sponsoring with Kaepernick and all of this, but they don't look within to see how they could actually do things to make everybody's lives better off. And the place where I would suggest them to start would be to eliminating their own class hierarchy and producing things cheaper for everybody else. However they have to get there, I don't know. It's worth them looking into.
I mean, I think the issue, given that model, is that you're putting the onus on the company to change the way that does things, right? Because it's better for everyone. And, theoretically, the argument is, well, it'll be better for them too in the long run. But I also think that lots of companies are very resistant to having to deal with things like that. We live in like a really short run economy. I mean, look at how over leveraged everyone is. That's not a good long run plan for any business, but yet all of America's businesses are way over leveraged, right? So trying to put the onus on them is, I think, not necessarily as effective as injecting competition into the marketplace that they occupy, right? If the government is producing a shoe that every American can afford and no American ever has to go barefoot ever, if they're producing that, Or even if they're producing it and shipping it worldwide, they're producing the best, cheapest shoe, then Nike would have to up their game. You know what I mean? Like, you're just injecting, you can inject this competition using government.
You can inject it, but the only thing the problem with that,
you're not taking over Nike factories.
No, I understand that. The only problem with that is the marketing issue, which is like, why do people buy Jordans versus Shaqs?
I mean, yeah, sure. But I also think that if you could have like, okay, let's look at a different model, like laptops. How many people would love to just be able to pick up a laptop and not have break the bank?
Okay, I see what your point is. I see what your point is. Taking away the stylistic point from Nike, because that's a style point for their shoes. There are multiple utilities that we use in our everyday lives. For instance, a laptop, a chair, a refrigerator, all of these things that
tires for your car.
Yeah, tires for your car, things that we know that we can produce that with a generic label on them at a much cheaper, more price efficient way to compete to compete with these other firms.
Right. And the thing is, you could do that with the government running it without it having to break the bank or increase our taxes. Because theoretically, if the government is running this business at, you know, peak efficiency and they're actually turning a profit, right, which is how it should run, not, well, we're going to make this shoe and we're going to lean on taxes to make it super cheap. No, actually use economies of scale. You're the government, take a big loan out from yourself, get up to economies of scale rapidly, and then sell the shoe, you know, or the laptop or whatever for the cheapest you can, while still turning, you know, like some small 1% profit or something to cover inflation, right? Like,
well, yeah, no,
I see like that,
I see
and
what
not
you're
have it
saying.
kill the taxpayers and still have the, you know, the company, you know, making money. And if you pair this with like the labor brigade idea, you could have it, you know, working some kind of way with those two things as well, right? And if the you know, if the other competition in the market has the same access to employees from the labor brigade as the government does, you know, it's a fair playing field, right? You're not creating a government monopoly on industry, which I think would be bad, right? Because if you use the government to, you know, undercut all of these companies, in the short term, everything will be cheap. And in the long term, everything will collapse because they'll just be running on credit forever, and like, not a good plan. But I think, you know, if you're injecting competition and keeping the competition fair between the companies and the government, because the government can compete with the companies. It totally could. You know what I mean? Like, then I think we would see things get better, because then if you know, make this laptop that everybody can have, now I think a lot of people would, you know, especially if they grow up using, you know, the Labor Core laptop, right?
Yeah.
If they grew up using that and it's worked fine for their whole life and it didn't cost them anything, or it was very, very cheap or whatever, you know, I feel like more people would be less likely to be like, oh, I need a new MacBook. Oh, I need a new, you know, PC. Like, because they'd be like, well, I've had this forever and it works fine. And like, if I want to get another one, it costs me nothing. Whereas if my MacBook breaks, I have to take it to, you know, the geek nerds or whoever, and they're going to charge me $8,000 to fix it.
So I 100% see what you're saying. And like, I would, you know, I would accept that as one potential model. But I think another potential model that we should consider is also just like, what if we just provided the labor aspect of things? So for instance, a company like Nike, a company like Apple, they send the labor that they actually really need to do the production stuff to China. What if the labor brigade just does the production element for them? That Apple has a partnership through us to be able to produce here. But in order to produce here, there's a sacrifice that needs to be, you know, made, which is to be able to produce at a cheaper price. You know, maybe Apple could have their special laptop through us, you know, versus somebody else. And I think that's
what I was saying, in that you can share the labor brigade, right? Like, if you have the government producing this whatever laptop for whatever price, and then Apple says, okay, we're going to try and create a competitor with your cheapo laptop, which I couldn't see Apple doing because it doesn't fit in with their whole elitist Apple cult thing that they have going on. Apple wouldn't do that. They'd maintain their elitist thing that they do, which is fine. But in this world, let's imagine that they're like, okay, we're going to compete with you and create, you know, a MacBook for everyone, so that everyone in America is using a MacBook.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to hire on the labor brigade. So now our labor costs are the same as the government's, right? And like, then they should theoretically, you know, if they have this factory or whatever, they, like, it should be the same playing field, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're, you know, you've worked out some sort of a tax situation for companies working, you know, inside of America.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't know, but I think, you know, I think no matter what, and I think both of us agree on this, that at the end of the day, you would need the government and the corporations, you know, working together in some fashion, you know, whether they're competing with each other, and that's a form of working together, you know,
Yeah.
right? Or there's, you know, supplying labor or funds or like whatever's going on, there would need to be some sort of an interaction. They would definitely need to be working with each other in some kind of way, I think, in order for it to really, really work.
Yeah. No,
well,
I think you're correct.
So it's a fascinating idea. I like to ruminate on that. You know, it's just, I like to imagine it. I feel like I could see myself doing something like that, you know.
No,
like
it sounds
I would be happy to do that. If I could just go be like, yeah, I'm gonna go do this thing and I'm gonna have my life and I'm gonna go build America, you know.
The cool thing about it is, like, I see so much potential with it. Like, let's say like a small business person, they design some really cool t-shirt, right? You're just, you know, it doesn't cost much to make one t-shirt, but if, let's say everybody loves this t-shirt, and now you pitch this t-shirt kind of like on Shark Tank, but to the labor brigade. And you're like, hey, you know, like I could sell this t-shirt, like, because we all know how like designer t-shirts are actually could get like insane prices, like anywhere from 50 to like, you could even go up in the $300 range. But what if everybody's wearing the same cool shirts like those for cheap?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh yeah, now all the top designers are making the best stuff for everybody. And then you're literally reducing the class structures in society that everybody is arguing about. And so then afterwards, you know, the next logical step would be for like, what would humans do now that we don't need to worry about like material wealth anymore? And that's a deeper question. But I think
I think we're a long ways off from having to answer that question.
Yeah, no,
labor brigade or not, I think that's going to be a while.
Right, but I also think it's completely possible to make these products cheap, very, very quick.
Yeah, no, and I think it would be good to see how things would evolve.
Like
I think
I would say like
there's a sense of urgency.
I would say within the next 20 years, if we adopted this now, within the next 20 years, like, we would see insane amount of growth in terms of a world economy, because like we would be competing with other nations, but they would also probably adopt the same model as us. They're like, hey, oh shoot, we totally forgot that we could make food in our own nation. We totally forgot that we could make our own shoes, because we know how to take Nike's shoe and reverse engineer it and make it just as good. As a matter of fact, if you're China, you know how to make everything that America knows how to make.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you're the one who makes it.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's important. The next conversation is that, like, the reason I think this is important is because we have to deal with China. And the best way to properly deal with China is to just kill them with kindness, you know, and to be able to send our own products to them and be like, hey, we know that you guys gave us products for a long period of time. Here, we're going to produce for you guys now as well, so you could share the things that we like. And hopefully maybe you might be able to reciprocate a little bit, and we're going to get some more ideas of free competitive trade where everybody is happy, you know.
Right.
But like, it's unsustainable to just to force China to believe that China is going to continue producing for us without us producing at all. Like, that doesn't make any sense for me. So like, that's why the labor brigade is necessary, or something it.
Because our credit's going to run out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's already running out. And what happens then? Which is the war aspect of it. Like, people have already started talking about this Thucydides trap again. That's something that like they've been talking about for probably the last 5 years, which is when like a greater power, a rising power challenges like the current top power, like 9 times out of 10 they end up at war, which doesn't have to be the case. Like, I'm not arguing for that at all. I don't think that we have to go to war with China, and I think that we could, you know, pump the brakes a little bit, you know.
Yeah, I'd rather not.
Yeah. I'd rather not go to war with them either. They don't want to go to war. Like, if we go to war, like, it doesn't matter if we adopt the factory system or not. Like, what's it called always ends up bad. War always ends up bad. But yeah, that's all I really got to say about that.
Yeah. Well, I think we really condensed down the idea this time.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty happy about that. Like I said, good ruminations, I think.
Labor
interested
brigade.
To see what happens over the next week, honestly. I would love to see somebody who knows what they're talking about, somebody with a voice, get talking about this. Let's get Sunil Gulati talking about it.
Oh, that would be so cool, actually.
Or I just would like people to start mulling this idea around, because especially just dream about it.
I feel like it's
dare to dream.
It really. I think I've done my homework in terms of like understanding like socialist theory to be able to understand like what they're actually talking about, and so I think like I have a decent understanding now of like what actually needs to be able to be done to be able to create more wealth for the overall nation, to make everybody's lives better off. Like there's no magic answer, which like the Democrats would basically suggest, which is to tax the poor. And then the Republicans would say, oh, we just need to have unregulated free market capitalism. And they're wrong as well. Yeah. So like, that's why like this problem is very serious. And we're trying to take it serious here on this channel.
Yeah, so, let's integrate some ideas. Let's start getting some progress, resolving conflicts. Yeah. We can do this, people. We can do this. Let's actually try and fight for living in a society worth living in.
Yeah. All right.
Peter Gabriel.
We'll see you guys next week. To Liberation Academy out.